Welcome to the HIT Podcast, H.I.T, Human Resources, Insurance, and Technology. I'm your host, Toby Kennedy. As we do every week, we are dropping into your feed on Tuesdays with what I hope is good, bite-sized, digestible content that we have done an excellent job of curating the various conversations going on in the space to say to you, hey, look, you trade me, 15-ish minutes a week of your time, and I will bring to you what I hope is really awesome content and conversations. This week's episode is brought to you by Montage Insurance Solutions, and I'm so excited to bring on Delaine Fowler. Delaine, how are you today?
Good. How's it going?
Really, really good. Thank you so much for doing this, for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure, Tobias. It's always great to connect and to get to know people. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So really quickly, just to give the audience the quick sort of high level on what you've accomplished in your career and sort of how we came to have one another and have you on this show. Would you just give me sort of a high level look at kind of your resume, your background, some of the things that folks turn to you for professionally?
Absolutely. So I'm a physical therapist by trade, and I took that skill set, and instead of staying in my little box of my PT practice in North Carolina, I started reaching out to employers because I was seeing the same injuries over and over and over again in the workplace. And so I thought, man, it's silly that these people are getting hurt with the same injuries. There has to be a solution. And so as a young clinician, I started visiting a lot of workplaces and really finding out that there were problems to be solved, and there's not a healthcare provider there. So that turned into my company, which is we go and put athletic trainers and physical therapists in-house in companies to be frontline healthcare providers for employees, because employees don't run off to the doctor because they're just hurt, like they're achy and sore and all that. They think that's part of the job. And so they don't run off to the doctor. But then they have something really big happen, and then they're pissed at their employer, and they don't want to be at the doctor, and they don't want to, they're scared. They don't know what it means. Are they going to lose wages? Are they be taken out of work? Or, all those things. So we feel like we're not only a solution to a healthcare problem, which is workplace injuries, but just in general, frontline healthcare providers for people just for little aches and pains and problems, and we take care of them early instead of waiting till they have a real problem. So it's preventative.
That's a good, that's a good segue for me into one of the things I know you've spoken about, which is sort of this, how I discovered, a healthy workforce and saved over $1 million for an employer, right? So can you talk to me a little bit about kind of the beats of that talk and sort of the premise behind that sort of, I don't want to call it that title, right?
Sure. And again, it's going out to companies, you learn really fast where their problems are. And it's not necessarily always in their line design or how they want people to work. It's really on employees' choice of work, or the guy who trained me did it this way, so I'm going to do it this way, even though it's ridiculous, Or if you have somebody who's 6 foot tall and they train somebody who's short like me, like 5'3", it's different.
You don't have to out yourself. You're on Zoom.
No, it's all good. I'm tall in spirit. But to go out to companies and talk to employees, and they'll tell you what their issues are once they know why you're there, and you're not there to, make a list and turn it into their employer and be the bad guy. Once they know you're there to help, employees will open up and say, hey, this is really the problem here, and this is what I think the solution is. And so we partner with employers to connect with their employees, and then to find out, like, hey, how do we solve these problems from an ergonomic standpoint? And so I would go out to companies and just really ask. I just tour around to clients that use us as their physical therapy providers and just provide value to them to say, hey, there's a solution here, and the employee's voice is what really means something. And once you give power to that voice, you really make a happier culture and a happier workplace, because people feel heard, listened to. And when they see their employer take action, they can say, oh, my employer does really care. That's the whole point, right? The whole point of human resources isn't to be the bad guy. It's to make sure we're helping our employees do what they need to do in the workday and still be able to go home.
And speaking of the employees, I also know that you talk a little bit about employee engagement, right? And you have some thoughts around that. Be curious to unpack that with you a little bit.
Sure. A lot of times when people get attritioned up, that Peter principle, right? They get attritioned up into a position because they've been there a long time, or they seem like they'd be a good fit. And somebody says, you should be the manager of this department. Yep. And then they are totally lost because there's, no manager training, or, the guy before me or the girl before me retired and left me with this big list, and I don't know what I'm doing. So to bring this back to, hey, management is a conversation, management is understanding, and management is being relational. And I think that's the biggest thing. When I was a younger person, I was a young life leader, and I never knew what kind of impact that would have on my life, but it really made me realize, it is really, life is built in relationships. And so we can make those relationships great at work, or we can make them full of angst and make them hard. So, and I try to apply that to my business as well with my employees, that, it's a conversation. This is a conversation. This is a growth opportunity when there are hard things and hard challenges. But to approach it the right way helps everyone in their workday.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of making life better, also, I know that another thing that's kind of a passion of yours is movement, right? And how we can engage, that sort of a philosophy into our day-to-day lives. Do you mind talking to me a little bit about your thoughts on that?
Sure. So I send my kids to private school, and I send my kids to private school not because I think our educational system bad. It isn't. But in the school I send them to, they put a true value on making sure kids move every day. They have way more PEs. They have way more recesses. They move in their classrooms. They're active. And I used to joke about it. Like, my friends would be like, oh my gosh, you're sending your kids to private. And I would say, well, they move more. But now I take it really seriously, because I think, like, we're now in that second or third generation of people that went through school where PEs and recess and music and art have, gone away. A lot of it. The home ec, the woodworking shops, all those things, they've kind of, in a lot of ways, gone away. Now we took them up to technical school, right? So, go be a plumber and electrician and all that in technical school. But we've taken it down to the basics in our educational system. And that means movement's gone away. And I think that it's created a whole two now generations of people who are on the whole lacking movement, unless it's a real big skill set, right? Because you have your baseball players. I was a baseball player, but you still can't squat right.
Yeah.
So we have these skill set athletes, but we don't really have functionally fit people on the whole in workplaces.
It's interesting. I played Division I college sports, right? For a team that, when I was there, we were ranked as high as 7th in the country, right? But it's soccer, and I was a goalkeeper, and I've had people ask me out to hoop with them or to do another sport, and they're looking at how unbelievably unathletic I look, and they're like, weren't you a college athlete? I was like, yeah, I was a goalkeeper. It's a specific movement and skill set, and if you don't get some of the other rounding out, sometimes it doesn't always translate.
That's right. So I was a Division I swimmer, and so I go fast in straight lines. I run fast in straight lines. I swim fast in straight lines. But you pick up a game of basketball with me, you're gonna cream me. Totally.
That's good. So we'll make sure we're on opposite teams and level it out then. So although I think you're 5'2", you said, or something. So within kind of the community that you're engaged in, it's a really interesting angle to have taken that kind of PT and, movement and almost kinesiology to, maybe put words in the conversation that you weren't using. I don't want to put it in, but like it's where I kind of see this conversation, yet it grafts onto corporate America and the workplace. And can you talk to me a little bit about the intersection of where you see value in that? Why would an employer keep listening to this episode? Like, what does that matter for them?
And I always say to employers, have you ever thought that the employees that are doing these jobs of taking down boxes and putting up boxes and loading trucks and making widgets on your factory line, have you ever changed the perspective and turned them into industrial athletes? If you approach them as if they're athletes on the field, what would change about your approach to them? if we treated everyone like an NFL football player, an NBA player, an Olympic athlete, or even a Division I college athlete, there's care that's afforded to you that people don't get, and it's right there for you. All you have to do is say, my shoulders bother me. Go to the athletic trainer. Go to,
Yeah.
And so why aren't we?
I've been jumping in the ice bath 6 times a day at work. You know what I mean?
That's right. I still love a good ice bath when I run.
Me too.
Hard,
Me too.
I totally could have set that trend off way earlier for sure.
I know. That's what I try to tell people. I'm not doing it now because it's cool. I've been doing this for 25 years. Yeah. Right on. So obviously, yeah, there's an aspect of, you're not going to be able to get an ice bath in every warehouse, but to the extent possible, like you said, even if it's not a 180-degree paradigm shift, if employers can shift their mindset a little bit towards, like you said, industrial athletes, such a cool term, then there might be some adjustments they would make. What are some of the adjustments that you would say apply to many employers, or if they were listening for a nugget today that they might be able to take away and say, you know what, that is a good thought and I can apply that?
Yeah. And I say for us, it starts with, if you had your industrial athletes warm up in your facility, what would they do? How would you warm up the people in your facility? For instance, my 11-year-old is playing basketball. He has a very good coach, but his coach does not believe in warm up. So he lets the kids shoot around and do some dribbling drills and whatever. He's not really in charge of it. He's busy playing in the game. And so therefore, their team does not really start playing good until the middle of the second quarter because they're not warmed up yet. And the same thing's true with your work team. If they're not planning and preparing for the game by getting warmed up for even just five minutes, it's really hurting your productivity by not doing it. So by not warming up.
Yeah, this basketball coach notwithstanding, we've talked about, working our way through athletics. So I'm familiar with lots of different warm-ups that are incredibly important, especially in 11-year-old sports. But so as we're warming up, we're talking, jog, stretch, this, that, and the third. What are you talking about and where? Are you talking about warehouse workers? You talking about white collar workers? You talking about little chair yoga? You talking about some jumping jacks? Well, I mean, what are you talking about literally?
Yeah. So we do mostly work with factory workers and warehouse workers. So we do physically want them to warm up. We want them to get going. Because when you're engaging your body, you're engaging your brain too. So we tell our employers, like, hey, you're not just getting their bodies ready, that you're burning off the fluff of their drive-in. They might have just woken up, 10 minutes ago and hopped in the car. They might be having some sort of outside stress. If you physically get their bodies moving, you're going to lower their anxiety levels. You're going to get them focused for what they're supposed to do and get their heads in the game. And so it could involve, some controlled squatting, some arm raises, that kind of thing. We don't have anybody do jumping jacks particularly, but a lot of functional movements, right? Squatting, lunging, arm raises, shoulder rolls, reaching overhead, turning and twisting your body.
And you literally do this stuff in employers today?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Talk to me about the person that's hearing this going, not my company. How does this get received? How does it go over?
Yeah. So, and it can be several ways. So if you're one of those people that, my employees won't do that, or we tried to do that before, right? We tried to do that, totally failed. People got super self-conscious because they don't know how to move their bodies, or somebody made fun of them or something like that. And so we've heard that. What we find is that sometimes you don't start with warm-up. The warm-up seems like the intuitive place to start. Where you start is, hey, we want to take care of you. And what are the things that we can do to take care of you physically, right? So what would be helpful? And some people be like, do chair massages once a month, right? That sounds great. It's not going to fix any problems, but it's going to make everybody feel good for a little bit. So I think we have to redefine what that really kitsch and awful term of wellness is. We've turned wellness into, hey, fill out this form and tell us you don't smoke, and then we're going to give you.
Well, it's like how you talked about PE. Now PE is an in the classroom thing where they learn about the body, and you're like, just go out and run some laps.
Yeah. It baffles me if you have teachers and they're like, oh, my kids are out of control. I'm like, did you take them and run them around the track once just to shake it off. They're like, oh no, it's 32 degrees outside. I'm like, it's just right at freezing. It's okay.
Yeah, they could do that in your 32-degree weather. They could do that in Los Angeles' harsh, 71-degree winters. So we'll be fine.
That's right. Yes. The balmy LA winter.
Yeah. So, okay, we talked a little bit about the warm up and that may being one place and how there might be some other places. Do you have thoughts on, outside of warming them up on the daily, but I don't know, walking desks or removing the chair or walking breaks or more than just the daily warm up? How are other places that you've said, hey, I recommend these physical changes, literal physical changes, and what they might do to the workplace?
Sure. And one thing I do for our office workers, we love doing desk modification. I have what I call a mobility desk. So I stand at my desk all day and rarely take a sit down break, almost never now. But you have to train for it. Surprisingly, when I taught myself how to stand all day at my desk and just have this desk where I can move around and, it has foot rests and I can put my foot up and shift places on it and adjust my screens around to stand one way and stand the other way. So we encourage that for all of our desk employees. Figure out a way to start training yourself into standing. So it took me a good month and what I would find, it wasn't that I physically couldn't stand up, it was that my brain would start shutting down around 3 o'clock. Like I couldn't think standing. So I'd have to sit down and do the rest of my work. But after time, I got to where I could work the whole day with standing and still think really well and clearly. And I think it's really helped me even on the fly when I'm speaking to groups or whatever, because usually you do consulting, you do a speech or something I would say that's consulting, standing up. And
yeah, this is me feeling guilty that I'm on camera sitting doing this interview, right?
I'm sorry. It's not, I know you say the P word, right? You say posture and everybody goes.
Yeah, that's right. I'm still waiting for my, Hoka sponsorship to come through for the pod so I can get those shoes where I could stand all day on a cloud, So if employers out there are listening to this and they'd like to pick your brain or engage you either formally or informally, how might folks be able to get a little bit more information about this idea of, how we can connect our physical, literal, moving, mechanistic bodies to what we do every day, and doing that more thoughtfully might be helpful?
Yeah, and absolutely. A super big passion of mine is talk to employers and just helping employees be well and feel well. So I'm always happy to connect on LinkedIn and start this conversation. We've had a very nice conversation on LinkedIn as well. And I'm not a human resource person, right? I didn't go to school to be a human resource person. I went to school to be a physical therapist. But I realized that people don't come see me. They come see me because we've gotten results for them, right? In our PT clinic and practices, they see our results and they've heard good things about us. But quite honestly, they just want us to treat them as human beings and not as a check mark on their day of healthcare. Right. And so we've tried to bring that sense of warmth back to healthcare with our employers. And so I love talking to employers about how just they can strategize, doing something different and stop calling it wellness. Because you say wellness and everybody's, I'm going to do a walk-in program in the spring and I'm going to get my 10,000 steps every day for 10 days. And then I'm going to get my reduction in my insurance premiums. And that's great, but that's really not what it's about. We really need to be building foundational health and things that employees can take with them, whether they work for us or not. So we're building a healthier society.
And is your pushback on the word wellness that it's become a little box checky almost and not, it's so efficient because you really need to get a little bit more into the meat in order to see any ROI?
Right. So it's too general and it's too vague, and because it's going to mean something different for each employer, and what kind of work their industrial athletes do.
Yeah.
Too. So I think it's important for people to HR people to be thinking about these things, and corporate executives to be thinking about what is that wellness really? How do we mentally, emotionally, and physically support our people? And to know they aren't separate. They are together. These things are together. All three go together. And to discard one and address the others it's not a win for anybody.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when we talk wellness with our employer groups, we're talking, how big the picture can be. And sometimes it wades into even like bringing out their credit union or their 401k provider for financial consulting, because mental wellness can be tied to financial stressors, right? It can be so encompassing.
100%. And we've tried to practice what we preach as well. We've done that. We've brought in financial advisors to do, we have a weekly, we call it our think tank meeting for my company. And we all get online and we try to mix it all up and keep things fresh, but we bring in outside things and say, hey, your financial future, and we know, you can kind of see it with certain employees, like you can tell they're strapped, whether it's by force or by their own bad habits, like, and so they are asking for help and want help, and so we definitely take inventory of that and try to provide that as well where we can.
So beyond some of the things we've talked about already, maybe just to close us out here, when you see wellness done right and it going well, right, and you see these campaigns and programs going well, what's maybe a parting thought beyond some of the things we've talked about where you see it going well that people, can look to and can think about?
So besides the whole story that any business working with businesses wants to tell, which is, hey, we're going to affect your bottom line, right? Which is the great story. I think the story really is, how many of my employees are now coming to me complaining versus 6 months ago? So if you're taking inventory of how many times the human resources people are getting pinged, how many things they're being reactionary to versus being proactive to, and watching those trend lines go down as you hone in your really good wellness strategy, health strategy, industrial injury prevention strategy for your corporation. How does, I think when HR paperwork reduces, that means something's going pretty good most of the time, right? And so that's, I kind of look at it as, how much extra work is the C-suite doing to manage their employees? We've had clients that they were doing great, and then something shifted in the market, and then all of a sudden, these are clients that weren't quite clients yet, and then all of a sudden they have a string of 3 injuries, and they're like, can you come help us? Like, what's going on? And so they're reaching out, and then we have some employers that know they have very physical, demanding work, and they know they're going to have issues and injuries and people that are fatigued, and so to manage around fatigue and help people recover well, and talk about it as a recovery strategy on how people treat their bodies outside of work as education. I think it's just as important for our employers to do that as what our school systems did or didn't do. Right. So if you really had that, if you were graced like me to have first grade teachers who did throw you outside when everybody was being wild and just made you run around the block. I mean, that was in the 80s, but I feel like, but if you still have that teacher who did that, that's awesome. And our employers should be educating their teams on what health and what recovery and fatigue management looks like.
Well, it's funny because it intuitively makes some sense, or at least to me, right? And maybe not everyone wants to throw kids out of the classroom, but it makes some sense to me that when the kids are bouncing off the walls, they might need a runabout, right? They just need to burn off some of that energy. And surely some of that declines over time as you get into adulthood, but not all of it, right? We don't go to 0%. We are still human beings. So that same rationale of, I've had too much time with this spreadsheet. Maybe I need to get some sunlight, get my Tootsies in the grass, get some, fresh air, maybe do a couple stretches. That it applies still.
And stretching your visual field. If you don't have a way to see a bigger, broader, there's a reason why people love the beach or the mountains, right? I live in North Carolina, so I'm really great. Like, you want to go to the beach, you want to go to the mountains. But we want to go see expanses. They make us feel good. They're really good for our brain. I just hung out at a speakers conference with a neurosurgeon whose work is all about how to make your brain healthy and how to improve your health and help you reduce your risk for Alzheimer's. And one of his things he said, do at least once a day, if not 3 or 4 times a day, is go outside and try to look at an expanse.
Yeah.
Just for brain health. And I was like, oh, it's so brilliant. And it's so simple and beautiful. So pretty cool.
Well, that's a good, they say, hang on to your scooters, boys and girls. I have a segue for you. Here's the segue, right? So from the expanse, we get to the bite-sized, which is our commitment here on the show, trying to bring phenomenal conversations into a bite-sized place. I can listen to you all day and for hours and hours. And I know you have several talks and are willing to do sort of talks for folks that are these topics in depth. But from the bottom of my heart, thank you for giving us a brief overview into what you specialize in, how you intersect with employers.
Well, thank you for having me again. I love connecting with people and meeting people who are trying to make things big happen in the world and help employers. I mean, employers make the world go round. We're helping people make a living. We're changing people's livelihoods and helping people grow and be safe and secure. And so anything we can do to help employers be strong, that's what we want to do too. So I appreciate you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That's all the time we have for you here on the H.I.T podcast. Join us next week. Join us every week. And until next week, make this the best week yet.